Hi, Shawnee.
Hi, Jivana.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm excited to get to be here and to share and have a little chat with you. Feeling a bit tired. I just finished my UPA training, and so I'm feeling a little Zoom fatigued, but I'm
Yeah,
ready to share.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
most of us are Zoom fatigued these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think let me just check that we're live. I'm still trying to figure this out. Technology,
Yeah. I
technology,
understand.
it's really something.
We'll
But
be we'll be um, complete pros after a little bit of time. Maybe
I
not
know,
willingly.
yeah.
We were thrown into it, but
Well, we are live. I know. I'm lucky. I have my 18-year-old son home with me here, and he's good at this stuff. So he's been helping me a lot.
oh, that's very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah,
They grew up around that time, so they're so tech savvy just
yeah,
naturally,
yeah.
so that's helpful.
That's true. So, and you have your daughter. Is your daughter home with you?
My daughter is home with me. She just finished her freshman year of college. Um, online, of course, not there. She came home for spring break and then she just never went back. So she doesn't even have any of her things. All of her stuff is at college. And
Oh, wow.
um, yeah, so she's home. And I mean, I have to say that's one of the blessings is that I've been able to have that extra time with her I wouldn't have had. Uh,
Yeah.
but I keep thinking about I went through my grieving process of her leaving, and it was a pretty intense grieving process. She's my only child. And now I'm going to have to go through it again. So,
Right.
but it's been a blessing to have her home and to get to have that extra time for sure.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been fun
So
to
I
have
was
her.
hoping you could start with the centering practice for us.
Yeah. So, I thought what we would do is we'll do a little centering practice for ourselves. And then as we explore our conversation about children and youth today, we'll get to explore a few practices that are, child centered. So, but we'll
Great.
just take a moment to first just connect to our environment. So, tuning into our senses. This is something that I do a lot with children. Sometimes the grounding comes from the capacity to have an awareness of more of our external environment. With a lot of children, that internal awareness is something that we have to get to after we have more of that external awareness. So just take a moment to orient to your space and maybe even look around the room. Take a moment to notice anything in your environment that your eyes want to pause and look at, or just notice what's in your environment. So for children, we would say find something that, two things that you see and have them name that. But just so find maybe two things that you see in your environment that your attention is drawn to. And then we're just going to take a moment to kind of do a body map. We'll take our hands onto our heads and we're just going to press down and move along the body, just a little pressure across the arms and just bring some pressure down on the shoulders. And then maybe squeeze the arms as you come down. Just feeling into your body, feeling into the shape of the body, feeling into that outline of the body. And maybe take the hands onto the legs, press down, whether you're seated in a chair or you're on the floor. And wherever you can go as far as getting that touch on the body, you might move down to your ankles and then just come back up. So you're just getting that connection to the outline of the body. And now bring your awareness to your feet. So whether your legs are crossed or your feet are on the floor, if the feet are on the floor, might just notice the feeling of the feet on the ground. And then we might close the eyes or keep the eyes softly open with the gaze maybe more towards the floor. So whatever feels most comfortable in your body. And then bring the awareness to the part of the body that feels most connected to the earth, that feels most anchored. You might notice if you're seated and your feet are on the floor, that might be where you feel most anchored, or your back body if it's against a chair, maybe your sitting bones. Just taking a moment to feel that connection between you and the earth, something solid. And as you bring your awareness to your feet, or if your feet are on the ground, you might wiggle your toes a little bit and notice that even though you have that connection to the earth, you have that choice to be able to move. And then notice where your hands want to be. Notice if the hands want to be face down on the thighs or face up, or if you want to hold one hand inside the other. If you want to clasp the hands, so just notice if there's a position of the hands that feels grounding for you. Bring the awareness back to the part of the body that feels most anchored and grounded. And then you might tune back into that external landscape, noticing any sounds that you might hear in your environment. You may notice the temperature of the room on your skin. Does it feel cool? Is it warm? Notice if there's any scents, any smells that you're picking up on. So just tuning into your senses. And we're noticing without the need to attach, just bringing our awareness. And then bringing the awareness to the sensation of the breath. No need to fix or change the breath, but just noticing as you breathe in, feeling the sensation of the inhalation in the nostrils, and feeling the sensation of the exhalation through the nose or through the mouth. And letting your attention rest on the inhalation and the exhalation, the sensation of the air moving in and out. And you may notice that there may be a movement that your body wants to do. Maybe it wants to sway left and right, or rock back and forth, or there may be some other movement. So just notice if there's anything that your body is wanting to do, if there's any movement. And you may notice that the body wants to be still. And letting the hands, the palms, come face down on the thighs, and feeling a little pressure, letting the heaviness of the hands rest on the thighs, and just noticing that experience of self-contact. Bringing your awareness back to the part of the body that feels most anchored, most grounded. And we'll take one hand on the belly, one hand on the heart. And just take a moment to set an intention for our conversation or our community gathering today. Accessing a feeling of compassion or an intention of compassion for the children in the world. Really opening our hearts to send that compassion and love to them, those who are struggling. Sending that same compassion and love to the parents and families. And then also allowing that compassion for our own inner children. And just letting that be our intention as we have these conversations around our topic today. And then just let the hands come back down to wherever they want to rest, whatever position they want to move to. Come back to that part of the body that feels most anchored. If it's your feet or the back body, your sitting bones. And then as you open the eyes, let the eyes softly open. So let the light in very slowly rather than opening them quickly. Just letting the nervous system awaken very slowly. Come back into your external environment. And again, if it's a resource to you, just to let your eyes move around and come back into your space. So looking around the room, noticing where you are, and noticing what your eyes are drawn to, and then just arriving back to the center.
Thank you. That was great. That was actually kind of moving for me, just because of I've been talking about my daughter a bit in the last few interviews I've done, but you know, she's really struggling. And so when you said that, you know, to connect to compassion, you know, for her, it's just very moving for me, and for the family, for myself, you know, as a parent of a kid who's struggling and who has, I mean, she has various traumas and addiction issues, mental health issues. We don't know exactly really what it is, but and I think that's such a struggle that we as parents can have, is that compassion for ourselves and really giving ourselves a little break, right? And there's so much shame and guilt and criticism that comes when our children are not maybe thriving in the way that we want them to. And, you know, there's a lot of suffering that can come with that. That shame piece is just so important. You know, I feel like we have so many expectations for our children, and so if they don't perform perfect and go to a great college or whatever it is we have in our mind, we feel like we've failed in some way. And especially I'm an adopted parent, so I think there's like another layer to that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's an element, I think, when you think about childhood trauma and you think about attachment relationships, that I think with children who are adopted, even though they can have all the love and all that connection and community, that there's always that element of feeling that detachment from that, you know, primary biological parent, because there is a biological attachment and connection that children develop in the womb, right? So I think that's already an element that children who are adopted, that's something that can be a big challenge for them to navigate in their life, for sure. It doesn't mean they can't thrive, but we want to help get them those resources to support them with that. And I think also what I really have been working through a lot with my own self is I had a lot of trauma as a child, very significant amounts of trauma and loss. And I've really been working a lot with my own inner childs, and really working with bringing compassion and love to my inner child, and protecting my inner child. And, you know, because we have so many criticisms, we're such inner critics. And I think that I love children so much, and this has been my dharma and my path since I can remember. Yet there's this, you know, challenge with being able to love my own inner child, and this challenge of being able to allow my inner child to feel seen, heard, loved, and valued. And so I think our own work with that is really important as well. So the compassion for our inner child, because our children, their behaviors will trigger our inner child. They'll trigger our insecurities, and they'll trigger our past traumas. And so it's a lot of working with our own stuff.
Is that really what got you into this work? Was your past?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I like I said, I grew up in a very challenging environment. My dad was an alcoholic and a drug addict. He actually died of a drug overdose when I was 15. And there were a series of very significant traumas that happened pretty close following my dad's death. And we lived in a small town, so the whole community knew everything about it. It was this major thing, so it was like I already had this stigma almost, in a sense of being this sort of damaged kid in my own perspective, right? And I had a lot of acting out self-destructive kind of behaviors. I had an eating disorder and those were all my ways of trying to cope with grief and loss and a lot of the experiences that we had as children growing up with an alcoholic parent. So I knew I wanted to work with children since I can remember. I used to line up my porcelain dolls along my wall and teach them. And I was a nanny when I was 17. And I mean, I've literally been working with children for 3/4 of my life since I was 17. I babysat when I was a teenager. And I think the reason why I got into this and I have such passion and heart for children is because I had suffering. And and I think it's that recognition and that understanding of what that feels like and wanting to be a support to children and knowing how, as adults, one person can make a difference in a child's life. One resource, one attachment relationship, even if it's not the parent, that we can change the trajectory of a child's life just by giving them a felt sense of safety and showing up for them. And what I always say in terms of the desire with children is that they feel seen, heard, loved, valued, and included. And that's really been my driving force in my life, my whole life. I have so much joy in being around children. It's just healing and nurturing to me. And I like being around children who struggle.
Yeah. It's so funny that you're saying that because I feel like the opposite right now. Having 2 teenagers and like so much struggling, I'm just like not wanting to be around kids. Like I just
I get it. Well, and as parents, we have that attachment relationship. So it's definitely been harder emotionally with my daughter for me to stay in that same place of compassion for myself in that same place, right? There's so many triggers that happen as parents with our own kids. But I really think that is really, I do believe that in life, part of our dharma is that the challenging experiences we've had in our lives, that we can turn those into purpose. And I really believe that that's been part of my life's journey is there's purpose behind my suffering and struggles that I've been through in that way.
Well, I'm sure you've helped a lot of people.
And a lot of people have helped me. I feel like these kids have been my saving grace. I've learned so much from them. They've taught me so much about patience and about acceptance and so much. I've learned so much. And I worked really for a significant amount of time in my career as a behavior specialist. So I worked with children that in a non-public setting, in a public school setting, with the children who were considered the most challenging children within the San Diego County where I live. And so I, really significant trauma. A lot of the children came from, many of them with disabilities, with autism, with learning disabilities, but also a lot of children who were in foster care, who were born into drug addiction, right? Or alcohol addiction, or extreme abuse and neglect as children. And we know that children's brains are impacted by trauma. And so many of these children had learning difficulties because their brain development was impacted by the significant traumas they experienced. Lots of foster kids, lots of kids in group homes.
And were you using yoga back then, or is that more recent that you started?
Well, it's interesting because I started integrating yoga into my programming back in about 2010. And it's so exciting to see the evolution of understanding, about trauma and understanding, all of this in relation to the nervous system, because I was doing so many things back then that were very much related to what we're doing now. And my primary focus with kids was to help them learn how to self-regulate, right? So, helping them develop tools to be able to regulate their own arousal states, their high arousal, low arousal, their emotions. And so that was really, even though I was an educator, I was a teacher, the primary focus was always on behavior, because if we're dysregulated, we can't learn effectively. And so that was not my first inclination to move towards the academics. It was to move towards getting children to, well, first it was developing connection and relationship with them. Because without that trust and that connection and that felt sense of safety, children will really struggle with, being open to learning or being open to having a relationship with you. So that was always my primary focus. And then the self-regulation tools. And I found when I taught those, kind of like the bottom-up approach, rather than the top-down, that in education system, that's what we focus on, which needs to change. I found that once they learned those self-regulation tools, they were able to learn and thrive.
And those were yoga tools in particular that you're talking about? Yes,
many yoga tools. So I started integrating the practices of yoga, breathing, movement into my programming. And it was a critical part of the program. It was in pretty much every element of the day. We did it in between our lessons. We did it throughout the day. We focus a lot on getting children to identify their emotions and really get to communicate what they were feeling, working on understanding what was going on in our bodies. That's really what drove me to write my book, was that I had been implementing that. And I went through my yoga training around the time that I was doing my master's thesis project. And I did my thesis project on the effects of attention, the effects of yoga on attention and on-task behavior. So I was doing my own data because, we record data related to behaviors in that program. And then I found that it was tremendously impactful in that way. So I had the opportunity to really get to see the changes and record data related to that when I first started implementing it. That was back in 2010 when I started doing that as a specific emphasis in behavior, working with behaviors, working with self-regulation.
And were you going to show us some? Do you want to show us some?
Yeah, I'm going to show you some. I'm going to close my shade because there's a little glare in my eye. So give me one moment.
Okay.
There we go. It's a little better. Felt like I couldn't see. The sun was starting to shine. So I'd like to just do a little breath, because breathing can be a bit of a challenge. A lot of these concepts can be kind of abstract for kids when we're talking about yoga and breathing. And I work a lot with the senses, and I have many children I've worked with over the years who have sensory processing challenges. But one of the things that we're learning about trauma is that the sensory system is greatly impacted by trauma that we experience, right? So if you've ever experienced a really significant kind of impactful trauma in your life, you might notice that there's some sort of sensory dysregulation that might happen related to that. I was in a car accident several years ago with my mom, my stepdad, and my husband. Very, very serious, significant. We almost died. And I had all these sensory overwhelm. Anything that was moving in my environment was just overwhelming to me. Sudden sounds, and that went on for a really long period of time. And so there's a lot of imbalances that can happen in our sensory system. So I work a lot with the senses and getting children to first ground. So grounding is, and I'm going to just talk about a few resources that can be really helpful. There's something called proprioception, which is kind of awareness of our body, really is what that is. But we have all of these proprioceptors in our body. And when we experience trauma, or when we experience dysregulation, it's very easy for us to get kind of disconnected from the body, right? Or we go into the anxious mental thinking, or we get completely dissociated from the body. So getting children to come back into the body can be a helpful resource. And I usually with children work from the peripheral inward, or sometimes in yoga, there's this element of working, out this way. But with kids, before we start to get them to tune into understanding their internal senses, we want them to feel a sense of being in their body. So that practice of, and I call it kind of like, sometimes we put on our superhero suit. And this is how we, we do it. And we squeeze all of our body and we put on our superhero suit. So we have our superhero suit on, right? But something that's helpful is having some kind of weight. And I forgot I was gonna explore that a little bit. Like when you're doing a meditation or you're sitting, for instance, a child's at a computer, they're doing their homework, they can get really dysregulated and frustrated. Having some kind of weight on the lap. So I have like my yoga blanket right here, right? And I place it on my lap. I actually use this a lot. So maybe even if you have something, and those of you at home, if you have some kind of thing that can provide a little weight on the lap, and just notice how that might allow you to drop down a little bit into the earth and feel a little more grounded. And then just for a child who's kind of out there, this can be a nice thing to give them that connection back to the earth, to ground them down.
Yeah, that's great. I use that for adults actually too, for Shavasana chair in a chair.
Yes.
Something resting on the lap, it's actually
it just adds that proprioception and right. And when we were doing the squeezing, this is proprioception. So it's giving us a mental idea of our body map and kind of that our bodies are here, right? We're not just floating in space, that we're connected to our bodies. I do a lot of tapping and we tap our body parts and connect to our body parts. So it's kind of signaling the brain to the body, oh, I'm here, right? Connected. And also many of the children I work with, they don't even really know their body parts. They don't know what their elbows are, what their palms are. So it's getting them to develop that vocabulary, but also bring more connection to their bodies. I like to do a breath called flower wind breath. And this is to teach the element of the inhalation and the exhalation, right? So we're going to take our flower. Here's our flower. Think about a flower, maybe the color of your flower that you want it to be, or a flower that you've seen out in nature. And think about a sweet smell of a flower that smells really nice. So we're going to breathe and we're going to smell our flower. Just smell it. And then open your palm and blow on the palm like there's wind on the palm. And see if you can feel the wind on your palm. Could you feel the wind? Let's try that again. So breathe in, we're going to sniff. And breathe out and blow on the palm. Good. Let's try that one more time. Just breathe in. And then blow out. So we're bringing that tactile sensory awareness there, but also there's a cause and effect that's happening with children when in teaching breathing. Really, primarily what I teach is cause and effect kind of breathing, where there's some kind of movement or sensation or something that's happening with that to give them that, turn something that's more abstract into something that's a little bit more concrete for them.
Yeah.
So that's a helpful thing. Another thing I like using, and this is also orienting. So orienting can be visual orienting, but it can also be tactile orienting. When we connect to our sense of touch, it actually orients us to the here and now, right? So I have a little feather here. These are nice, they're soft. And so you might just, I wish I could pass a feather through the computer to you so you could experience it. Someone needs to invent that. Yeah. We can pass things through the computer and connect that way. You never know. We never know. So just feeling. So you might have them feel it and notice. So what is it? How does that feel? It feels soft. And what's the color? And then having that feather there, and I call it a peacock breath, peacock feather breath. So like a peacock's feathers, what would that look like if the wind was blowing on it? So you breathe in and then you breathe out and you blow on the feather and notice how the feather is moving. So this is almost meditation for kids. It's a 1-point focus. There's breathing that's happening there. And for children, just to get them to be in the present moment without thinking of these chaotic thoughts or anxious thoughts. So this is a little kind of pocket of peace they can have to put the feather in their pocket, carry it around with them. And this can be a little self-regulation tool that they can use. Right. So lots of different ways of doing cause and effect with breathing. And I have a whole kind of toolkit of things like that. But those are ways to get them to see there's some kind of action that happens with their breath. So it's also motivating for them. They want to see the feather move. They want to feel the wind on their palm, right? So just exploring that, tuning into all the senses. When we tune into our senses, we become more present and connected fully to our environment, to our bodies. I have.
Can I just stop you there? So I think that's an important statement just that you said, because related to trauma, it seems like trauma can affect our nervous system. We move into a state of fear, or we respond. The sympathetic nervous system turns on, and then maybe we're no longer present to what's actually going on. It's more of
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we have that fight-flight response where we're in that kind of hyper-vigilant state where we're almost too aware. We're almost too vigilant, and the brain is waiting for some terrible thing to happen, because that trauma, right? Or freeze, where there's almost lack of that sensation. There's lack of connection. There's that dissociation that can happen. So you'll have some children who have that more high activation hypervigilance, where they're always when a trauma occurs, it's not so much about the actual event that happens. It's about the nervous system's response to that event, right? So with children who've experienced trauma, they're in their minds, they have this neuroception of the world around them, and in their minds, everything is danger, right? So people's facial expressions, situations, they seem dangerous to them. Yeah. And so they're in this state of hypervigilance. Or you have those children who might be more withdrawn, who might be more, they're more quiet. They isolate themselves a bit more. Those are the ones that I really worry about in a lot of ways, because we don't get to see those signs as much about the shutdown and the immobilization, right? So really what we're working with children is getting them to mobilize, allowing them to do movement and breathing and activities that can kind of release that activation in the body. Because that helps if you have hyper arousal. You have all this energy, right? You've got the adrenaline and the cortisol running through the body, and kids need to move. So part of that is movement, and doing movement that releases energy. When kids are acting out or they're dysregulated, so many times we want to tell them to stop acting that way. Yeah. But behind every behavior is a need. So if they're behaving that way, it means there's some need, and we want to give them something that's going to help them to meet that need. And that might be, doing some dancing activities. It might be doing some breathing and movement activities that will help release that tension or built up energy in the body, right? Because once they're in that state, there's that prefrontal cortex is just shut down. They're in that survival place in the amygdala. And Daniel Siegel's great book called The Whole Brain Child talks about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. Well, we can't get upstairs until we address the downstairs, right? So you're working with, there's several components that you're working with. The grounding, the embodiment. This is something that I have here. This is called my grounding stone. I actually use this all the time. I mentioned I was in the car accident. I carry this in the car with me. I have severe trauma around that I'm still working through. And it's weight. It's a little heavy. It has a weight to it. I can tend to dissociate when I start to go into that fear place. And so this gives me that tactile orienting. And I can feel the weight of it. it's also smooth, and I can rub it if I'm feeling anxious and I need to kind of let a little energy out. And so a grounding stone is a nice thing for kids to have when they experience a lot of that agitation, or if they tend to kind of dissociate and not be in the body. This gives you this whole sensory experience.
Yeah.
Right? And you talk about, how does it feel? It's heavy, it's smooth. This is labradorite. It's a type of stone. My husband got it for me, actually, and I take it with me in my car. I use it all the time. Whenever I'm in the car, riding in the car, this is my resource.
That's funny. I have one of those too. Labradorite also.
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it, but
yeah. So resourcing, right, is absolutely necessary and important for all of us, but for children is very important for us to give them lots of different resources of ways that they can regulate. And a big, really important thing with children with trauma is empowerment and self-agency. When we experience trauma, it's like we don't have choice. Right? We don't get to choose. Something happened to us and we didn't have a choice or a say in that. And especially with children, children really are so disempowered.
Yeah.
They're really a minority of, they're a marginalized
group. Yeah.
Marginalized community.
Yeah.
In so many ways, because, they're really, I think the element of empowerment is so important for us to teach children boundaries and self-agency. And so I do a lot of movement and breathing where we're tugging, pushing, pulling, throwing, growling, roaring, making all these animal noises. We do volcano breath. Do you want to do volcano breath with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So volcano breath is for when we feel frustrated or we feel anger or tension in the body or in our emotions. This is a healthy aggression. With anger, there's such a stigma towards that. We're not supposed to feel angry, especially in the yoga community, right? Don't feel anger. But these are all emotions that are part of our human experience. Yeah. And there's a reason why we experience those emotions. Think about how boring life would be if we didn't have emotions. So with children, it's this healthy aggression where they can express, number one, it's making emotions okay. Right. We explore through breathing and movement that it's okay to feel anger. It's okay to feel anxiety and sadness and all these things. Then we give them these tools to express them in sort of a healthy way. So we're going to think about something that we might feel a little bit angry or frustrated about right now. So use this as your opportunity to let go of some frustration or anger, okay? And then we're going to do volcano breath. Well, Jivana, what do you feel when you feel angry in your body? Do you notice any sensations that happen in the body when you feel
tightness in my chest?
Tightness in your chest, yeah. I a lot of times feel like muscle tension kind of, or a lot of kids talk about feeling heat, right? So we're going to let out that heat. So reach your hands out, breathe in, grab your anger, frustration, and breathe out and go like you're letting all that lava and hot energy erupt. Reach out, breathe in, and explode. Let's do it one more time. Okay. Reach out, breathe in, and explode. And let all that frustration and anger out. Howd that feel?
That's great. It's funny. I actually had one like that I did with my daughter when she was little.
Good, yeah.
Practice, I tried teaching her yoga when she's little, but it was hard because then as the parent, it was hard to be the teacher, so I had to let it go after a while.
Yeah. And, I think I wanted to mention that I think it's so important for us to recognize how important community is with our children. We were talking a little bit before we started this conversation about, my heart has been in deep sorrow, really, over this situation with COVID and many children out there that are not in safe environments, that don't have a safety net, that are not able to access education in the same way online, that don't have those resources. so often going to school, that's the only safe place that children have to go. And that's where their safe people are. So I really just the emphasis of how powerful we can be as community to other people's children.
Yeah.
Because I've tried to have my daughter practice yoga literally her whole life. And she says, Mom, I don't do that. Yeah. But, there's little bits and pieces that she's definitely gathered. But she went to college and then she called me one day and said, Mom, I love my psychology teacher. And you know what? She reminds me so much of you. And I said, oh, why? And she said, well, she does this grounding practice right before we start class. And I went and I felt so anxious and she did it. And I felt so calm afterwards. And, it was like, and I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you to that psychology teacher.
Yeah.
That, because they're not open to their parents in the same way.
Yeah, but I would echo exactly what you're saying, just because of my daughter, I feel like, I failed somehow. Like I should have been able to give her everything she needs. That's just not possible. Like I can only serve one role in her life. Like I'm her dad, and that's what I focus on. I don't need to be her therapist. I don't need to be her teacher. I don't need to be her yoga teacher. Yeah. And it's hard. I know for parents right now that are homeschooling and trying to do all those things, it's just overwhelming. Yeah.
And that goes to that topic of co-regulation, right? That we are the co-regulators for our children. In fact, when our children are infants, they have no capacity to regulate on their own. We are their co-regulators, even in through early childhood. And when children are even into whatever age, it doesn't matter. We are co-regulators for our children. We're co-regulators for our partners, in a sense, our regulation will impact the other people in our environment, right? So if we're really dysregulated as parents, I want to just take a moment and place our hands on our hearts and bring compassion, because we will be dysregulated also. We're not always going to be patient, perfect parents. Dysregulation happens. But we can learn some of these tools ourselves. Even just the grounding when we start to feel dysregulated, right? So this is what happens is our children start off here. And then when they start to go here, we're here. And then they come up here and then we go here and then we're way up here together. And it's like this dysregulation that's just matching and meeting each other. Yeah. As parents, what we want to try to do and continue to come back to is to try to keep ourselves here in this grounded place. And when our children are up here, it's like we're staying here, and there's this sort of settling that can happen if we can maintain this level of groundedness and calm in our own nervous systems. But I want to say that's been my goal is to do that for my daughter, to stay regulated because of my practice. That's my job. But I also started to see that I would, by staying calm no matter what she did, it was not showing her that her words and her actions had an impact on me. So I had to be more open with her. Like I couldn't just be calm no matter what was going on. I actually had to show her, that's not okay. You can't say that. You can't do that. I had to get a little upset just to show her my feelings too. Yeah. Sometimes yoga practitioners, we think we're supposed to be, I don't know if this is just the way I was trained, but we have to be calm all the time. And that's not always helpful, actually. Yeah. So I had to learn how to express myself. Absolutely. And there's a difference between being calm and grounded. Yeah. So I like to think about it in that way where, okay, I could feel my feet on the floor. Mm-hmm. I'm going to let my child know that there are boundaries, because boundaries are actually, as a parent, it's really important for us to be teaching our children boundaries, healthy boundaries, right? If we let our children run all over us, or we just give in to everything that they want, that's not teaching them healthy boundaries. It's not really supporting them. But if we can stay grounded in our communication with them, we won't be up here in the way that we communicate, right? We can come from a place of groundedness. So it's more, not so much about the calm, because you're still going to have that internal activation when your kid is behaving in a way that's dysregulated. Mm-hmm. And it's knowing that that's okay. Mm-hmm. And it's having an awareness of that and recognizing, oh, I feel this activation happening. So we're getting that internal felt sense and being aware of that, and then saying, okay, I can feel my feet on the floor. I can take my hands I can squeeze my hands. I could do something that's going to help me ground for a moment so I could pause before I react.
Yeah, right? And for me, it started to be a practice of honesty, truthfulness with her, rather than always being in the role of parent. I tried to be in relationship with her just as a human and be like, look, this is not okay. You can't say these kinds of things. Like, I just started to set boundaries. Eventually, that's why she's in a treatment program, because it was just like, your behavior is unacceptable. Like, I know personally I could deal with it. Like, I could handle that, but it's not healthy for you to be doing this here. And so we had to just keep putting more and more boundaries on her. And now where she's not living with us, and it's very painful, but I feel like that's actually honest. Like, it's more honest right now.
Absolutely.
Her behavior isn't acceptable here. She has to learn how to kind of get in touch with her feelings and her trauma so that she can behave in society, actually, and not.
Because that's really, we have to be somewhat regulated to be a part of the world around us, right? And also, you setting those boundaries for her is teaching her how to have those own boundaries for herself. And again, sometimes it takes community. We can't do everything as parents. When our children are really struggling, reaching out to a therapist, reaching out to support, and letting go of this notion that, well, I'm going to teach them all of the yoga practices and teach them all of the self-regulation and they're going to be okay. And no, sometimes it's not going to be okay. And you find those resources and you find those community outlets that you need. And because it takes a village.
Right.
And honestly, I want to say that the significant amount of trauma I experienced as a child, I really think the reason why I'm thriving in many ways, one, are my practices. They're huge. We just had a really significant family trauma, tragic loss that has just shaken all of us to the core. Are my practices first. Those are in these little grounding things. They're huge. My resourcing has been huge, but also the community. We grew up in a very kind of community-based environment. We lived in the woods and the mountains with no electricity or running water. We always had community around. And when I was in high school, I had very specific people in my life. When my dad died, I was really going downhill. I almost didn't graduate from high school and was doing a lot of self-destructive stuff, even had some suicidal ideation. The attendance woman took me in to her home. My best friend's parents were like a huge resource to me. My coach was everything to me. So it's recognizing that as parents, like fostering outside connection with other adults in the community. And as adults in this world, that we take on a responsibility, that it is our responsibility as human beings in this world that we look out for other people's children.
I mean, I really appreciate that. I was to say, just because I know for me, like, there was a lot of shame in the beginning with my daughter when she started. I mean, she's always had challenges, like from just, always. But we used to pretend things were okay and kind of hide. And it was just, once we were able to be honest about it with ourselves and then seek help, it just changed everything. And teachers and therapists and her, I mean, we created a whole, there's a whole team of people that supported her over many, many years. And me, I mean, that saved my life, because just to be able to share, to first of all, not feel alone. And I think this is true with any trauma or any challenge that we have, to not feel like we're alone. To hear other people reflect back that it's okay, and that you're doing your best, that is so meaningful. It saved me. It saved me.
Yeah. And I think what we've learned about trauma is that you can't heal alone. You have to heal in community. And that this connection, this element of connection is so important for our mental health and well-being. I think that's why you and I were talking about doing our online trainings, how we're struggling so much with figuring out that connection part, right? Because this connection element is everything in terms of our felt sense of safety in the world's connection to others. So, and I think over the years, I've had many parents have to put their children in group homes. And I've always said to them, it's an act of love.
Yeah.
It's an act of love for yourself, an act of love for your child, because now they're going to have a community of support. You're going to have a community of support. You can't do this on your own. You know, you're a good parent, and all we can do is the best that we can do. And, you know, I think there's so much work for us to do as parents in this world to have compassion for ourselves and, you know, like come back to our own nurturing, our own love, our own compassion, healing our own inner wounds, you know, and also just stopping that intergenerational cycle of trauma that happens when we have those inner wounds, right? And then they just carry forward. It's this work that we do with ourselves so that we can maybe try to stop that cycle. Happening.
Like you said earlier, it's about boundaries, you know, learning how to protect yourself and therefore also really be of service to others. Like I know as a parent, that's how I learned about service and how I learned about yoga. Knowing how far I can go and being honest with myself about that is really the most kind of sensitive I can be, and that most self-awareness I can have allows me to be a good parent and actually realize what I can't do. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And isn't honesty so empowering?
Honesty.
When you can finally get to that place of being honest with yourself, honest with your children, there's just this empowerment that comes, I think, for yourself and your child.
Yeah. I think if parents of kids with disabilities, you know, there's like a whole nother level that I think is hard for people to understand, you know, just the guilt and shame and the sense that we could never do enough and we can't be enough and that we failed. I mean, it plays games with your mind. So I'm in it right now, but I just know that, you know, for other parents out there who have kids who are struggling, you know, it's just, I love what you said, just have compassion for yourself, you know, take care of yourself. That's the most important thing first.
Yes.
And then you can be a parent. Like you have to take care of yourself first.
And isn't that hard? Because we didn't always learn that. We learned that taking care of ourselves was selfish or was, you know, that we should be doing everything for our kids. But when we come from that place of care for ourselves, and I think just this practice every day as a parent or whatever hand position, that intention for yourself every day when you wake up is, you know, may I have compassion for myself. And just really trying to come to that intention every day and reminding yourself you're doing the best you can. You know, my mom and I are so close. And, you know, my mom is we're so close. And, you know, she did the best she could as a parent with everything that she was experiencing. And so it's this, we have to forgive ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not an easy process. It doesn't just happen because you say, I forgive myself. It's like, it's a constant coming back to, right. So I think, you know, in recognizing that that's going to support that co-regulation, that compassion, coming back to our own selves, self-care is going to support the regulation of our children, right. It's going to help us be in that grounded place for them, not always calm again, but when we start to feel ourselves just get really up there with our kids, it's just like, okay, I feel my feet. Like I can feel my feet. I can feel my hands. Coming back to just the simple resourcing that, you know, can support us in in coming out of that fight flight, because we go into that with our kids.
Exactly.
Right.
So there's some comments on here, but what I was thinking, I feel like we should wrap up. I don't want to take too much time. So maybe you can, I don't know if you can go on to Facebook later and respond.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
People are thanking you.
Oh, wonderful. Let me show one more quick little thing.
Okay.
Or two little quick things. Here's I have a little beanie baby lion here. Kids really love lion's breath. That's a really nice way for releasing energy and kind of healthy expression of emotion. But this has some weight to it. Balancing activities are really great for children with helping them to regulate right? So it's nice to have little beanie babies on the head and practice maybe balancing the beanie babies or balancing something on the head. This helps with their sort of reflexes in terms of like children who have had situations where they haven't been able to react or respond, and also helps to kind of regulate and bring the body to more a little bit of a grounded, focused state. And the weight brings like a little bit of grounding
It's
to the
funny.
body.
I do that with adults, actually, with yoga blocks.
Okay.
Street pose with a yoga block on your head. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, it brings you, there's a lot of that proprioceptive and vestibular. So we go into the sensory, vestibular, and proprioceptive kind of stuff going on there. But I love that I'm going to end my conversation with a lion on my head. And then just another fun thing is, again, some kind of things, sensory sort of things like this is my worry ball. And before we leave, we're going to do worry breath together before we end. Okay. So think about something you might be worrying about. We've got some global worries in the world right now, don't we? And for me, really, I'm waking up with such tenderness in my heart and saying prayers every day for the children in the world, that they be protected and that they be supported and that they have community and that we can come out of this situation that we're in and that we can help our kids, because this is going to be for many children, they are not in a safe place. And this is going to be a very impactful experience for them and a journey of healing. So think about something that you're feeling worried about. Okay. And we're going to do let it go breath. Mm-hmm. So you're going to reach out, breathe in, grab your worry, breathe out, let it go. Breathe in, grab your worry, breathe out, let it go. And one more time, breathe in, grab your worry, breathe out, let it go. And say bye, worry, like you're tossing your worry ball. Because if we hold on to our worry ball, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
You know what I love that you did actually with that one and with the earlier one, the
Volcano Breath.
Volcano Breath, that with both of them, you actually brought in the feeling first and then you let it go. And I actually thought, that's quite a powerful statement to say, bring in the worry and then let it go, because it's identifying the emotion.
Absolutely. This whole notion of not being able to feel emotion being bad, we need to embrace that we have emotion, right?
Okay.
So
I could talk to you forever. So
I know. Okay.
So people can find you. Maybe we could put a note in here also, but how do they find you? What's your
so my website, Asanas for Autism and Special Needs.com, but I'll put it in the comments. I'll go in and put comments in there. And I do online trainings now. So my trainings are all online, and I'm also working on a specific focused trauma training as well. And then just to mention, I have a toolkit that's a really great resource that integrates so much of the things that I'm talking about here. It's a visual toolkit. So I'll just add information in there if you're interested in seeing it. You can go to that.
The C.A.L.M toolkit, right?
C.A.L.M Yoga Toolkit.
And then your book is Asanas for Autism?
Asanas for Autism and Special Needs. So, and on my website, you can find all that, but I'll put the links to that bit of information. Thank you, Jivana. You and I have been on this path of sort of, I don't know, I feel like we're on this like parallel path in many ways together. And I'm so truly honored that you asked me to share. And I have such respect for you and the work that you're doing, and I'm so in alignment with it. So I was really honored that you asked me to be part of it.
And thanks for all your support with me as a parent. This was really helpful. So
I feel like this, right? Just coming back to this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.